Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to our Market Intelligence webinar series. My name is Melanie Conner, and I'm a social scientist working at the International Rice Research Institute, and I'm based in Kenya. So today we would like to welcome 3 speakers from the International Potato Center, SIP, and we have with us Diego Nazeri, André Devaux, and Peter Wouters. All 3 speakers are value chain specialists and have been researching for SIP for many years. Diego is based in Vietnam, and his work focuses on end-user preferences and product market segmentation for impactful breeding. He's also a post-harvest specialist. André is a scientist emeritus for SIP, and he is now based in Belgium. He has great expertise in applied research in potato production systems and value chain development, among many, many other things he has done over the years. And Peter is the country manager at SIP in Madagascar, and his work focuses on seed systems and post-harvest management in Africa. And today, the 3 will present their research on tailoring potato varieties for Eastern Africa's processing industry, insights and implications for breeding and market segmentation. If you have any questions, please post them into the Q&A. And we would like you to introduce yourself in the normal chat box. So your name and where you're from and what kind of institution you're working for. So with this, I would like to hand over to my colleague Diego to start the webinar. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you, Melanie, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining us. Today's presentation draws on a comprehensive study conducted by myself and my colleagues from the International Potato Center in 2023 in the framework of the CGR Market Intelligence Initiative. We will present the main insights gained from this study and discuss their implication for breeding programs and market segmentation. As mentioned before by Melanie, this is a joint presentation which I will deliver together with André Devaux and Peter Wouters. The goal of this webinar is to use the results of our study to provide you with a clear understanding of how the potato processing industry is evolving in East Africa and what this means for future breeding and seed system programming. The presentation will unfold as follows. After introducing the scope and methodology of the study, I will begin by looking at the recent evolution of the potato sector in Africa and present the current situation and the outlook of the industrial potato processing sector in East Africa. This will be followed by Peter, who will delve into the specific characteristics of traits that processing companies prioritize when sourcing fresh potato tubers for processing, and explore the alignment of these priorities with the ones set by breeders from SIP and national programs. After, André will examine the most common varieties currently being used by processors and the perception the processing companies and breeders have about these varieties. Then I will discuss the implication of our findings for market segmentation and target product profiles. Finally, Peter will conclude by providing a broader view of the challenges faced by the industry in accessing suitable raw materials for processing and provide some recommendations for overcoming these challenges. This is critical for contributing to both business performance and the livelihood of smallholder farmers who still represent the backbone of the potato sector in Africa. At the end of the presentation, participants will be given the opportunity to ask questions or seek clarification or provide some constructive feedback. Our study focused on Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda, 3 important potato-producing countries characterized by an emerging potato processing sector and representing different stages of its development. We concentrated on industrial processing only, therefore not including small-scale cottage-level processing or roadside processors. Specifically, we look at 2 categories. First, medium to large-scale processors of crisps and fresh, chilled, or frozen ready-cut chips. Second, the rapidly expanding fast food chains that directly process fresh potato into fried chips. We used a mix and method research approach that included an in-depth literature review and analysis of production and yield data, which were obtained from Faustat, while import data were obtained from the United Nations Comtrade database. Additionally, we conducted actor mapping through consultation with national partners like the National Potato Council of Kenya, the Kenya Agricultural Livestock Research Organization, the Rwanda Agriculture Board, and for Uganda, the National Agricultural Research Organization and the Potato Platform. This mapping helped us identify the main processing company in each country. Finally, we conducted key informative interviews with breeders, industrial processors, and fast food chain to gather the information and data required for our analysis. Our sampling strategy was designed to ensure that we capture a representative picture of the potato processing sector in these three countries. In Uganda and Rwanda, where the number of medium to large scale processors is limited, we included all of them in our sample. In Kenya, which has a more developed processing industry, we aim to cover at least 30% of the market share by selecting a representative group of processors. We also included all large fast food chains in Uganda and Rwanda. We refer to large fast food chains to the businesses with multiple outlets, the most popular probably being KFC and Cafe Javas. We didn't look at fast food chains in Kenya because they mostly use imported ready-cut chips rather than sourcing and processing fresh potatoes. Finally, we ensured that breeders from SIP and national programs were represented, with at least one breeder from each national program. Several of the companies that we contacted, unfortunately, were already out of business or did not agree to participate in the study, probably afraid of sharing some sensitive information. Therefore, our final sample consists of 30 respondents, 15 processors, 8 fast food chains, and 7 breeders. Despite being relatively small, this sample allowed us to gain a good understanding of the evolution of the processing sector and compare the diverse perspectives of different stakeholders. Let's now take a step back and look at the broader context. What was the evolution and what are the future perspectives of the potato sector in Africa? Over the past few decades, potato production has been on the rise across the continent, driven by increasing demand for both fresh and processed products. The graphs show the quite impressive growth, especially starting from early 2000. Currently, potato is grown on about 1.8 million hectares in Africa, and East Africa is the major contributor with about 730,000 hectares, or 40% of African land allocated to this crop. East Africa is followed by North Africa and West Africa, which represent about 25 and 20% of the potato area in Africa. About 27 million tons of potato are harvested annually, with North Africa contributing about half of this output, while East Africa, with about 7.5 million tons, represent about 1/4 of it. Increase in production in Africa is due to a combination of more land planted to potato and increase in productivity over the years. Over the last decades, the yield has increased significantly in North Africa and South Africa, while growth has been far modest in the other sub-regions, including East Africa. This explains why East Africa, despite having the largest area under potato, is not the main potato producer in the continent. In the last graph, it's possible to appreciate that within East Africa, our target countries have significantly contributed to the spectacular growth of potato production in the region. Today, Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda all together represent about half of the regional production, with Kenya being the largest contributor. But what about the processing sector in Africa? Anecdotal evidence indicates that it is rapidly expanding as the region's population continues to grow and urbanize. However, we found a lack of reliable information about its size in East Africa. Most of the available studies suggest that processing accounts for 5 to 15% of the total potato market. However, these figures include the informal, small-scale cottage processors who still dominate the market, but do not typically seek out varieties specifically selected for processing. Rather, they mostly process potatoes that can be easily accessed in the market. This has implications for the quality and consistency of processed products, as well as for the development of the industry as a whole. As the industry grows, there will be increasing pressure to develop and adopt varieties that are better suited for processing. While it is difficult to get a reliable figure about processing in Africa, we can easily access international trade statistics. They show that import of the main processed products, frozen ready-cut chips and potato crisps, is still relatively limited, but growing at a spectacular pace. In the last few years, East Africa has imported on average about 11,000 tons of frozen ready-cut chips every year, equivalent to over $13 million. In the last 20 years, import of these products has increased by an average of 15% per year. In case of Kenya and Uganda, by over 30% per year. With regard to potato crisps, the statistics indicate that East Africa has imported on average about 3,500 tons annually, equivalent to over $12 million. For crisps, the most spectacular growth has been recorded for Rwanda, where in the last 20 years, import has increased by a staggering 41% per year, much higher than the average 10% increase in the whole East Africa. So we made an attempt to assess the current size of domestic industrial potato processing in Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda. Kenya produces an estimated 9,250 tons of processed potato products annually, which translates to almost 32,000 tons of fresh tuber equivalents. This production requires approximately 3,250 hectares of land, which represent about 1.7% of Kenya's total potato acreage. In Rwanda, the processing sector is much smaller, with an estimated annual production of about 1,800 tons or 3,750 tons of fresh tuber equivalents. This accounts for about 0.4% of the Rwanda total potato acreage. Uganda's processing sector is also modest, with a total production of 660 tons or 1,600 tons of fresh tuber equivalents, representing just 0.6% of the country potato average. In red, I have highlighted products for which import currently exceeds domestic production. These volumes are really small and suggest that import is critical to fill the gap between domestic supply and demand. In the first column of this table, we present the estimated growth of domestic industrial processing over the past 10 years. In the case of frozen ready-cut chips in Kenya and Rwanda, there were no such industries at that time. However, for other products and countries, the growth has been impressive and estimated between 90 and 680% over this period of time. Looking forward, we project significant growth of the potato processing industry over the next 10 years. In Kenya, for instance, the production of frozen ready-cut chips is expected to increase by a staggering 2,500%, reach an estimated 11,500 tons annually, and requiring 2,350 hectares of land allocated to potato. Fresh, chilled, ready-cut chips could double the current output, while crisp production is projected to rise by almost 160%. Rwanda and Uganda, though starting from a lower base, are also expected to see substantial growth. Rwanda's crisp production could increase by over 1,100% and frozen ready-cut chips by 660%. In Uganda, the production of fried chips is expected to grow 42%, and the one of crisps by over 130%. This projected growth will have important implications for land use and raw material sourcing. In these three countries combined, the total production of processed products by industrial processors is projected to increase from the current 11,700 tons to almost 38,000 tons in just 10 years. It is estimated that the required land allocation for supplying the potato processing industry will increase by 4 times and reach about 5% of the total potato land. If you see the text in red, you will notice that the main growth is expected for products which are currently largely imported from abroad, suggesting major opportunities for import substitution. Finally, our survey respondents indicate that this growth will be primarily driven by sector consolidation, with fewer and larger processes. All in Uganda, our respondents expect the growth will be driven by an increased number of players. These growth projections underscore the importance of developing breeding programs that meet the specific needs of the processing industry. As the sector expands, the demand for varieties that are well suited for processing will increase, and breeders will need to focus on developing varieties that possess the traits required for processing. I now hand over to Peter, who will present the most important traits required by the industry and the alignment with priorities set by the breeding programs. Over to you, Peter. Peter? Melanie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Peter, it's your turn.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, greetings from Madagascar. I have some internet challenges. I want to go deeper. Diego, I don't see the PowerPoints moving. I would like to go deeper into the preferences of processing companies for traits. The following table shows the points of view of breeders and processing industry on the importance of 10 key traits for potato processing varieties. The traits considered are frying color, size, storability, shape, oil absorption rate, flesh color, number and depth of eyes, dry matter, reducing sugar content, and skin color. Overall, when analyzing this graph, we see well-aligned points of view on the priority traits for processing varieties between the two groups. However, we also note some divergences. Let me go first deeper into the divergences. For the processing industry, the traits frying color, size, storability, shape, oil absorption rate, flesh color, number and depth of the eyes are important to very important traits. We also note that for processing industry, they make a more systematic trait differentiation between tubers for chips and crisps. Chips processors and fast food chains look for long oval potatoes which are large in size. Crisp processors, however, they look for round potatoes, medium in size. Overall, storability is an important trait for processing industry. However, we see some difference between the respondents. Fast food chains, in fact, they buy potato when they need it. They only store it for a few days, so for them, storability is considered as less important. The number of eyes are important traits for processing industry, because the fewer the eyes, the lesser the waste, the higher the productivity. When we look at the overall sample size, we notice that dry matter and reducing sugar content are lesser important traits for the processing industry. However, we see here some differences between the types of the industry and the countries. Regarding types, there are no fast food chains who indicate dry matter requirements. Differences between the countries show that dry matter is much more important for the processing industry in Kenya and in Rwanda compared to Uganda. The same for reducing sugar content. We see again some differences between the countries. Reducing sugar content is important for processing industry in Kenya. However, it is considered less important in Rwanda and Uganda. These differences regarding dry matter and reducing sugar content between types of industries and countries show, we assume that the reason behind this is that there are differences in the stage of the development of the processing industry. Now let's look at the breeders. For the breeders, all traits except skin color are important to very important traits. However, at the breeding level, we notice that they are less specific on trait differentiation between tubers for chips and crisps. Regarding the eyes, as long as they're shallow, breeders consider the number not important, in contradiction with the processing industry, who looks at the number of the eyes as important. Dry matter and reducing sugar content is also important to for the breeding industry. The breeders, however, they make no big differentiation between chips and crisps. Overall, out of this table, one of the conclusions is that size and storability needs more attention from the breeder side. This is regarding differences, but there are also, as I mentioned, some consensus between the two groups. For example, frying color are considered as important to important, very important, and it should be yellowish and golden yellow. Oil absorption rate, again considered as important to very important. This should be as low as possible because it affects processing costs and the quality of the end product. Flesh color, important as well very important for both groups, which should be light yellow. The eyes, important to very important for both groups, which should be shallow. And for both groups, skin color is not considered as an important trait. In fact, they consider this just as a way to identify variety, and it's peeled off and thrown away before the processing starts. I give the floor to my colleague, Andre.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Hello everyone. So during this study and through the surveys that we carried out with the breeder and the industries, we have analyzed the perception and the use of potato variety for processing. Next slides, please. So our findings indicate that the processing industry in Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda, at the moment, they currently use both potato variety selected locally from SIP germplasm, and also they use varieties introduced by Dutch seed companies. We have also observed that there are some divergence between the processing industry and breeders' perception about the use and acceptance of variety by farmers and the industry. I'm going to develop a bit more this analysis in the next slides. When the breeders indicate that they give priority to production traits the product interselection process responding to farmers' need and food security, I think it makes sense. So when we talk about production traits, we're talking about yield, resistant to disease, and some agronomic aspects, such as earliness and dormancy. So it makes sense because we should know that in this country, and as was already mentioned by Diego, between 85 to 95% of the potato produced goes to the fresh market. And also in this country, the potato crop is ranked among the important strategic crop for food and income security. So I think the breeders are following I would say, the national policies emphasizing the food security aspect through the selection of production and the production aspect. On the other side, the industry prefers varieties which are specifically bred for processing, just to make their processing process much more efficient. For them, it's very important to have varieties with high dry matter, more than 10% to 3%, and also very low reducing sugar content. So, but these processing varieties that are more the aptitude of this variety, which are much better for the processing industry, are not available in volume. So at the moment, the industry cannot be very strict in the procurement of the fresh tubers, especially in Uganda and in Kenya, and they look for varieties which are available on the market. They've been testing them, and they've identified some varieties which have acceptable processing quality that they are using for the processing, and those varieties, we should know they were initially selected by the breeder for the production and disease-resistant traits. Next for them. So in this table, I wanted to just to describe briefly the varieties which are reported to be used by the processing industry, as indicated by the breeders and the processing industry. So you see on the left, we have 13 varieties. I have highlighted in yellow those varieties which are imported Dutch varieties: Challenger, Dutch Robin, Marquise, and Taurus. And also we have 9 varieties that were selected locally from SIP germplasm. When we compare the situation in the 3 countries, if we start first with Kenya on the left, you can see that the industry is concentrating on three imported Dutch varieties: Challenger, Dutch Robin, Marquise, for the processing qualities, but also they've included Shanghai for the reason I mentioned before, because Shanghai has some good processing characteristic, but it's not perfect, but they use it because of the volume required. It is interesting to see that the breeders and industry perception coincide for Dutch Robin and for Marquise. It is also the case for Shanghai, that has been identified by the industry. And then we have Tigoni variety. In Rwanda, out of 5 varieties, the industry is preferring 3 varieties. It's one of them is an imported Dutch variety, which is Taurus, and it is also recognized by the breeders. And there is a coincidence for the locally selected varieties between the breeders and the industry for Rwangume and also for Kinigi. When we move to Uganda, where we have 8 varieties that have been mentioned, again, we're going to the industry. They mentioned 2 varieties, Marquise and Taurus, but these varieties are not recognized, and at least were not mentioned by the breeders. There is coincidence on the other varieties between the breeders and the industry about Rwangume, Kinigi, and Cashpot. So in the next slide, we're going to go into a little more detail about this analysis. When you in the case of Kenya, and here in this table, we are presenting the analysis we did about the breeders' perception about farmers and industry preference of most common variety used for processing companies. And we compare that analysis with the industry view. So to follow on the graph, the green bars represent the blue bars represent the farmer's preference according to breeder view, okay, breeder's views. The orange bars represent industry preference according again to breeder views, and the gray bar represent the views of the industry. So, and then the scale is about the preference. So 1 is very little and 5 is the very high preference. So when you look at the results, we see that in the case of Dutch Robin and Marquise, which are 2 Dutch imported varieties, we can see that there is coincidence in the appreciation between the breeders and the industry. But we see that these varieties are not so well appreciated by the farmers according to the breeders. When we move to Shangi, it is okay, it is, I would say, below the average appreciated by the industry, but very much appreciated by the farmers because it is resistant to disease and producing well. Okay, so and then we have a variety Challenger, which is mentioned by the industry but not mentioned by the breeders. And then we have the Tigoni variety, which is not mentioned by the industry. So you can see we have coincidence about two Dutch variety, Dutch Robin and Marquise. You know, in the case of Kenya, between the industry and the breeders. There is also coincidence about Shangi, but it is less appreciated. And also it is recognized by the breeders in the industry. Okay, let's move to the next one, please. So in Rwanda, the same logic has been followed in the interviews. So if we look at the coincidence between the breeders and the industry, so you can see a good coincidence for Kinigi variety. Okay, so it is according to the breeders, well, it is good variety for processing, and I think the industry recognizes it. It's above the average. And what is important is that Kinigi is also very much appreciated by the producers, by the farmers. Another variety which is interesting to analyze is Rangume. It is less appreciated by the industry, but farmers like it very much, and breeders feel that it is also a relatively good variety for processing. The Dutch variety Taurus on the right, you know, is very much appreciated by the industry. There is coincidence with the breeders. The breeders feel that it is very good, but not so well accepted by the farmers. And we are left with 2 varieties, Kirungo and Kigungu, which are, we can see, I would say, well appreciated by farmers, but not mentioned by the industry. So you see that in some cases we have the coincidence between the breeders and the industry, in the case of Kinigi and Taurus, and less for Rangume. And 2 varieties are well appreciated by farmers, Kinigi and Rangume. Can we go to the next one, please? In Uganda, its situation is a bit different. You know, we have 8 varieties. Out of the 8 varieties, we have 4 varieties that are mentioned by the industry, but were not mentioned by the breeders. They include the 2 Dutch varieties, Marquise and Taurus. And then you have also Shangi and Rutuku. So this is, okay, first the difference between the other countries. And then we have 2 varieties that are where there is a coincidence between the appreciation between the breeders in the industry. It's about Cashpot and Rangume. And these 2 varieties are also well appreciated by the producers. Following that, we have Kinigi, which is well appreciated by the industry. In this case, Kinigi less recognized by the breeders. Okay, one of the reasons also might be because the Kinigi was selected initially in Rwanda, and maybe it's not so well recognized by the breeders, but it is well appreciated by the farmers. You know, so Also interesting to see that in Rwanda, Kinigi is much better appreciated by the industry as compared to in Rwanda. So that may also be the reason is that maybe the processing companies have different criteria, or maybe in Rwanda comparing to Uganda. And also what is observed, we have a wider range of varieties. And I think what we have observed that also the processing industries, they are small scale industries, in most of the cases we have seen what was presented by Diego, they're also influenced by the geographic location. Industries, the processing companies which are close to the border of Rwanda, they also influenced by the variety grown in Rwanda. It is the case of Kinigi and for example Rutuku, and those who are closer to Kenya, they are influenced by the varieties grown in this area, and it is the case of, for example, of Shangi. So you can see that the different criteria also used by the industry for the appreciation of these varieties. Okay, can we go to the next one, please? So to conclude, here are some observations. Dutch processing varieties like Marquise, Challengers, and Dutch Robin are preferred by the processing industry, especially in Kenya. We have seen it in the previous slides. And this is where the sector is much more advanced, in an advanced stage as compared to development, as compared to Rwanda and Uganda. Those Dutch varieties are just starting to be introduced in Rwanda and Uganda. But these varieties, which have very good processing characteristics, are less accepted by farmers due to susceptibility to lead blight, and they require also higher input requirement, which is not always appreciated by the growers. So, and when those processing varieties are not available in volume, so the processing industry, they look for other options, and the other priority is the availability of fresh tuber of popular varieties, which have acceptable processing characteristic. And this is the case of Kinigi and Rwangume varieties in Rwanda and in Uganda. But the advantage also, because they are popular variety, they are very much appreciated by the farmers. So when you look at the history of these varieties, they were initially selected locally from Simjamplas for the good production and resistant to lead blight and some other characteristics. So they become, and when you see in the last line, those variety were selected. When you see, we go in the 80s and 90s, so they've been around for quite a long time. So they became very well. If they remain, it is because they were very well adapted to the local conditions. They appear to be robust under local conditions and well accepted by farmers. So it is interesting to see that also they are presenting acceptable traits for processing. So these varieties in own analysis are referred to dual purpose varieties. So they are very well appreciated by the growers and well accepted in the fresh market, and also they can be used by the processing industries. So these dual purpose varieties, I think for us are an important step to start linking small scale farmers, producers to the industry before in the future for them to move into more specific processing varieties. Okay, this is what I wanted to say, and I now give the floor to to Diego again. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Andre. I will be very brief. I will explain how the results of our study mean in terms of market segmentation and target product profile. But before I start, I think I have to provide a bit of context what we mean for market segmentation. In the CGIAR and in SIP, we refer to market segmentation as the entry point to capture and discuss variation in the requirements of farmers for seed products. And the choice, the requirements, the preference of farmers is also informed by the needs of the others, which are so of consumers or processors. The farmers look at materials, a variety that can perform that well in the field, but also have a market for to be sold. This is the seed product market segment is different from the consumer segment. The consumer segment captures the variation in consumer preference for a food product. For instance, how different groups with different income level or different culture, which kind of preferences they show for certain kind of. So we define a seed product market segment as a group of growers with common variety needs. And as I explained before, this is based on a combination of grower requirements, which is based on where and how a certain crop is grown, and the end user requirements, basically what the crop is used for. So it's the combination between the requirements related to farming practices and the market, which constitute a market segment. I will not go into detail. I want to point out that there are 8 criteria for defining a market segment in SIP, and one of those is the end use. Currently, in the whole CGR, we have about 620 market segments for the different CGR crops, and they can be accessed through the Global Market Intelligence Portal. And here there is the link if you have more interest to go a bit deeper. To each market segment, it's associated only and only one target product profile or TPP. What is a TPP? It's the blueprint for the design of new varieties. It's basically a document that lists the traits, including their measurement and threshold, that a new variety must contain to meet the requirements of farmers, processors, and consumers in the segment. So basically, the target product profile defines the ideal product for a certain market segment. It is the reference document for breeders to decide whether to advance a certain material in the selection process. So, as you can see here in the figure, there is a list of traits from agronomic trait to resistance or susceptibility to certain biotic and biotic stress, and some quality attributes. And a trait can be essential, so the selection process cannot advance that material if the certain that specific criteria is not met, or can be nice to have. So an addition that would be nice to have in the product, but it's not a reason to discard the product in the selection process. So having said that, until recently, STIP had only 2 market segments for East Africa. One related to table potato and one for food processing. So quite a broad category. However, our results, as presented before by Peter, they showed that companies processing French fries and crisps actually require tubers with different characteristics, but specifically with reference to the size of the tuber and the shape of the tuber. That means that we had to split the broader processing market segment into 2, one specifically for crisps and one specifically for chips. And you can see here in these yellow circles. We also refined the segmentation by recognized variation in skin color. So now we have cream skin and red skin, and production environment. So before we focus only on highlands, and now we segmented also the markets for mid and lowlands. So basically, from the original 2 segments, now we are introducing 8 market segments for potato in East Africa. So besides the important impact in terms of market segmentation, there was also impact as a possibility to inform the refinement of the target product profile, specifically around 5 traits. First, tuber shape. So as we said, the target product profile for chips and crisps, now separated, to recognize variation in the requirements by the processing industry. So there is need to amend the threshold. For tuber size, this is a new trait to be included in both TPPs, both for crisps and chips. And this should be considered as an essential trait based on the importance placed by the industry on this trait. Skin color so far has been considered as an essential trait, but we have decided that this should be removed from the TPP or considered just as a nice-to-have trait. Again, this was mentioned before by Peter, number of eyes. This is an important trait. We were not aware of that. So this trait should be included in both TTPs as a nice-to-have trait. And finally, they need to increase the threshold for dormancy period for the current 90 days, which might work for fast food chains, but definitely is a bit short for industrial processes. And now I hand over back to Peter for the final remarks.
Yes, thank you, Diego. Next slide, please. Having the right variety is one thing. Having the right variety at the right time, at the right place, and in the right quantities is another thing. The following chart shows the different views of both breeders and industry on what are now currently the main challenges that the industry meets in supplying their raw material for processing. On the right-hand side, you see the results for each country, Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda. On the left-hand side, you see the results for the overall sample size. When we look at this chart, we can conclude that processing industry and breeders agree on one of the more challenging factors, which is limited access to quality seed. This is the blue column on the left-hand side. Although industry consider this as a little bit more challenging than breeders, they both consider this as a very challenging factor for supply. Breeders and industry also agree on less challenging factors. The poor farming practices due to limited knowledge, which are the gray columns. The knowledge by farmers on varieties, which are the yellow columns. And varieties that are not well perceived by traders. These are the dark blue columns. They are both considered, they're all three considered by both groups as less challenging factors. However, key is to see that there is a different perception between the industry and breeders on what are now really the main challenges for supplying raw material. And here we note that breeders consider willingness of farmers to invest in seed, as well as farmers' acceptability of processing varieties as far much more challenging than the processing industry. These are the red and green columns respectively. To a lesser extent, but still a big difference between the team groups, is the poor business linkages between producers and processors. Here also, breeders consider this as more challenging compared to the industry. When we look at this chart, and one of the conclusions we can make, especially when we look at the green columns, is that the industry focuses on its own specific processing requirements. It seems they are less aware of or place less importance to the negative perceptions that many producers have about specific processing varieties. On the other hand, then, the breeders indicate the relatively poor adaptability and agronomic performance of specific processing varieties. This was mentioned earlier by my colleague Andre. Next slide, please. Although we consider that the sample size was rather small, we can still make some concluding remarks. When we look at the industrial level processing in Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda, we learn out of this presentation that the processing is still limited, but growing at a rapid pace. we see that market demand for processed products, especially chips and crisps, is increasing and outgrowing the supply. This offers increased investment in potato processing together with strong local supply chain development in the 3 countries. We also learn that traits affecting processing efficiency and consumer acceptance are key for processing industry. However, although breeders are aware of the traits required for processing varieties, they consider this as secondary criteria because they consider this more at the end of the variety selection process. We also learn that breeders need to pay more attention to size and storabilities during the selection process. We also learn that varieties both selected locally from SIP germplasm as well introduced by Dutch seed companies are used by the processing industry in the 3 countries. However, the latter, those introduced by Dutch seed companies, seem to have challenges to be accepted by farmers. But to have a widespread adoption of varieties, we need varieties that show ability to meet both industry requirements and farmer needs. These are the dual-purpose varieties of which André has spoken of. Next slide, please. Diego has spoken of having 2 different processing market segments for chips and crisps, because processors of chips and crisps need tubers of different size and shape. However, within these market segments, those involved might still have different standards in the procurement of fresh tubers. There we might see some contradiction between the formal processing industry, who might be more rigorous, and those fast food chains, who seems to be less demanding and more flexible to use dual-purpose varieties. And finally, but not least, is that the availability of suitable varieties meeting the requirements of both farmers and processors is necessary, but not sufficient condition to ensure stable supply stable supply for processing. We need a more concerted effort to the strengthening of the potato value chain through improved coordination and business linkages among seed producers, farmers, and the processing industry. Especially, as I mentioned earlier, one of the key challenges negatively affecting the supply of raw material for processors is the supply and the timely sourcing of quality seed for farmers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Geoffrey, for this really wonderful presentation. And we do have a couple of questions in our Q&A. And I think I'm just going to read some of them as they came in. And you can, one of you can answer. And I will just start with the first one. I'm not going to decide which ones, because I don't know which is important. You can look in and maybe type an answer as well to the ones we may not get to. But so the first question is from a person, and the person is wondering if you did take not into account farmers or household consumers in the survey. How can we guarantee the breeder's view reflects the preferences of household families and or cookers? Who would like to take that one? Diego?
I can take that. I've seen that Andre was typing something, but I will take that. So no, we did not interview farmers. So we went a bit out of our comfort zone. You know, in SIP and the CGR, we very often we interact with farmers, but for the case of the study, we interacted only with breeders and industry. And of course, you wonder how we can capture the preferences and requirements of farmers without talking to them. And I think there's another person asking a similar question. I think here the point is twofold. First, our primary interest was to understand the perception of the breeders and the industry about the suitability of a certain variety for farmers. Secondly, the breeders are very familiar with working with farmers. They conducted so many trials during the selection process. So they start with research on station trials, but then they go and they conduct a number of trials. This is part of the normal process for having a variety accepted for release. So they have plenty of opportunity to receive feedback from the farmers. So we thought that it was not the best use of our limited resources to interact again with the farmers. But we think we have a reasonably good view for the breeders. And again, our focus was primarily to understand the divergence in perception between the two groups of people we talked to.
Oh, thank you. So I think the next question would be maybe for André. How to promote new potato varieties in order to enhance their adoption and use by farmers?
I need to put. Sorry. Okay. I'm okay. I was on mute. I think I was on mute, and I have the camera. Okay, so I think that to promote the new variety, this is a good question, but also a very difficult question. And if we talk about, let's talk about first the processing potato. I think what is important is to promote those varieties for at least for the farmers and for the industry to know about them. I think that's a first step. But then when we look at the process, I think also it's important to, in the case of the processing variety, it's important to collaborate with the industry, and also for the industry to invest in this supply chain infrastructure and public-private partnership to enhance the availability, the access of improved potato seed, because I think this is the key element. And so that would facilitate a broader varietal adoption. But this is not enough. I think it's important to work with the public sector to strengthen the formal seed system. What we have observed, in the past, all the potato varieties that have been introduced to the formal seed system, that they've made their way to the also, when those potatoes are in the formal seed system, and not all farmers can access them, but because they've been promoted in the formal seed system, they've made their way to the informal system, which is an important source of the seed for years to come for many farmers. So again, we need to strengthen the formal seed system, and from the formal seed system, it moves to the informal and allows to reach many more farmers. So these are just a short response to that big question. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And there's another one about intellectual property. I'm not sure if you want to take that as well, André. So can you comment about intellectual property for the varieties preferred by the industry, especially those that come from the Netherlands? Do seed producers or processors have to pay royalties?
I think that's also, it's an important issue. I've been interacting with some of the Dutch representative of the Dutch varieties. I've asked them about it. I think when they introduce varieties in a country, it includes agreement with the country, and I think there are the intellectual property should be recognized, and also these varieties were produced by private companies. So some varieties, have been already released for quite a long time, and there is no what do you say, royalties to be paid. But if royalties are still necessary, to what I can see at the moment, those varieties are multiplied by Dutch seed companies, especially when take the case in Rwanda. We have companies like Agrico, I think, which is, I think, many there. And I think they are covering those costs. This is the way I understand it from my interaction. But that needs to be analyzed more deeply to give us a specific answer to that question. But this is a point that needs to be taken into consideration. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. And maybe one more question. Do breeders have the tools and methods to select and cluster their production on essential traits? For example, mealiness, water distribution, hardness, cooking time. Not sure whom of you wants to take that one.
To select and cluster the position. Dominique Dufour.
I will try with our friend Dominique. Hi, Dominique. The very good question, I know. Actually, I don't have a very good answer to your question, but I know that the breeders, they have some protocols to assess the processability of the clones during the advanced meeting process. But I don't think they are still using high throughput phenotyping or other tools you are very much familiar with, and you are very much advanced with cassava. I think this is a question more to ask to some of our breeders. So if you want, I can link you up, or I'm sure you have the contacts to have a bit more technical details about the way to cluster different clones according to processability attributes. Apologies for not being able to give a comprehensive answer to your question, but it's really technical. Thanks.
Thank you. And we have 1 minute left. Maybe one more. Are those the recommendation of the 3 new TPPs are still tentative based on the research presented, or are they already accepted on new TPPs by the breeders? So that's a question from Victor.
Yeah, I think this is again for me. We are working with the breeders in SIP, and they consult the national programs. So yes, the idea of expanding from 2 to 8 market segments, this is basically taken. What we are doing is to characterize these segments to understand what is the size, the relative size of the new segments, or what is the indicative yield, the price for each of these segments, which is already a challenge. And in October, we're going to meet with the breeder team, which is in charge to refine the current TPP and to develop the new TPPs. And most probably we will have to prioritize. It might be difficult. For in the case of potatoes, SIP has increased from 9 to 59 market segments, so 6 times bigger. It doesn't make sense to develop all the TPP at the same time. Some will be relatively easy. They require just minor adjustments, such as now we have the TPP for processing. We have just to split between crisps and chips. This is going to be quite straightforward. In other cases, it's going to take a bit more time. So we will have to prioritize. So based on the impact opportunity that we will assess for each market segment, we will decide from which TPP to start. So this is still work in progress. But we really think that our findings can inform this process. So of course, we are in discussion and sensitizing breeders about the importance to take this into account when looking again at TPPs. Over.
Thank you so much, Diego. And our time is up. So there were a couple of questions whether this presentation will be available to the participants. We will upload the webinar on our market intelligence microsite on the CGIAR. So you can just Google that. It will be emailed through the email list we had. Maybe some of you might not be on that email list we have for the market intelligence. So please reach out to us, to Diego, Andre, Peter, or myself. So you can find us on the CGIAR website, and we will be very happy to help you and send all the information you need, the presentation and the slides deck to you over. So thank you very much, everybody. And yeah, have a lovely evening, a good day, a nice afternoon. And thank you very much to our speakers. This was really a very interesting presentation and very, very insightful. And we can learn a lot from it. Thank you so much.